A very warm good afternoon to everyone. It is very nice to see all of you, and thank you all for being here. So, before I begin, I would like to first welcome Professor Bhagat Oinam for taking this time and for agreeing to give us this lecture. I will introduce him a little later on, but before that, I request my colleague Meera Menon, who is also a doctoral scholar at NIAS CSP under Professor Sangeeta Menon, to please introduce the course. Over to you, Meera.
Thank you, Dr. Pushya, and very warm good afternoon to all of you here, and a warm welcome to all of you to the Philosophy, Self and Consciousness course organized by the Consciousness Studies program at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. So the subtitle of this course is Exploring the Context of Experience, and who are we and why are we here, and what does it mean to exist are all questions that the humankind has grappled with throughout the course of time. And we have a very, very interesting lineup of speakers who are great academicians and teachers who will be speaking to us about these very interesting subjects. And NIAS is one place where interdisciplinary engagement is well known for, and it is in this spirit that we have such interesting speakers lined up for this course today and in the upcoming sessions as well. So may I request Dr. Sangeeta Menon, who is the head of Consciousness Studies program and Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, to please make a few introductory remarks about the course and speakers.
Before that, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Meera, for that. In case, I'm sure all of you would have gone through the concept note for this course. There are 6 themes that will be covered over the course of this talk: self and experience in philosophy, self and experience in indigenous systems of healthcare, self and experience in aesthetics, self and experience in social sciences, self and experience in psychology, and self and experience in literature. So these are the 6 themes, and we will have a total of 18 lectures under each of them. And like Meera said, we have a very erudite group of speakers lined up for you. And also, I'd like to thank Professor Sangeeta Menon, because it was her brainchild, and without her support and guidance, this would not have been possible. So thank you so much, ma'am, and over to you for a few words.
And I remember one evening in Delhi somewhere, I think that was a program for the Young Scholars Meet. And I think the last I met Dr. Bhagat Oinam was that day. And that must have been at least 30 years back now. But I guess I recognize you and we recognize each other. And I thank Dr. Saurabh Todaria for suggesting name of Professor Bhagat Oinam for this lecture. And many other speakers also Dr. Saurabh suggested. Thank you, Dr. Saurabh. Well, if Dr. Pushya would not have added to the themes after Meera talked about the course, I would have done that. So I think Dr. Pushya saved me from giving an introduction to what this course is about, because it's very important that we share what is the cause and what is the purpose of this course. This particular course focus on the interdisciplinary engagements, on the conceptual frameworks that are needed for a student, a scholar, anyone to study the constitution of human experience and to see how we place the self and consciousness within those conceptual frameworks. This is particular experience is something which most of us regard as personal. But at the same time, it becomes very important when we understand individual and community engagements. And from that context, it's extremely important that we contextualize the things of philosophy, which are self and experience. And also how these basics of philosophy contribute to what we understand as consciousness, because the idea of consciousness or the phenomenon of consciousness today is a very interdisciplinary subject, and different people have different ways of looking at it. But then it's very interesting that compared to perhaps last 20 years, today we see that what we call as the commoner, even a commoner has interest in consciousness. So how do we bring in the commoner's understanding of consciousness? And it is in this context that health and well-being becomes very important. And I'm thankful to Dr. Pushya Gautama. He is a coordinator of this course, who herself is an MD in Ayurveda. So she understands the complexity which is involved in a system of medicine such as Ayurveda. So our idea is to bring in Ayurvedic medicine, philosophy, phenomenology, and also to some extent literature. And we feel that some of these disciplines are very central to understanding how the self can be appreciated, both in a philosophical manner and also in an interpersonal manner, in an intersubjective manner, in a lived world such as today, which is much more prominent because of the pandemic COVID-19 times. So with that very brief introduction, I also would like to say that we received once again a very overwhelming number of applications for this course as well. In fact, with this course, this semester, we are almost concluding the online courses we have. We have been conducting different online courses, I think, since June or so, 2020. And all our courses are liked by people, and that is a great happiness and satisfaction for us. And we also have participants from all around the world, which again is amazing, and people from very different backgrounds, who includes physicians, philosophers, literature students, and so on and so forth. So it's amazing, and it's a pleasure to go through their applications as well. So I once again thank Dr. Pushya Gautama for putting this course together, being the coordinator, and also thank all the other contributors to this course, including Professor Bhagat Oinam, Dr. Saurabh Todaria, who has helped us design the course, and all others. I also thank Niharika Sharma for hosting the Zoom platform for all of us. And I also thank Meera Menon for being there and of being help to Dr. Pushya. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here and for being the backbone of all our activities and definitely this course. I will now briefly introduce Professor Bhagat and then hand it over to you, sir. Professor Bhagat Oinam completed his MA, MPhil, and PhD from Punjab University, and his dissertation was on freedom and praxis of philosophy in Sartre. He has served as a lecturer in the Department of Philosophy, Northeastern Hill University, Nehu, Shillong, and later as an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Mumbai, before joining as an associate professor in the Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, JNU, New Delhi. He is currently a professor in the department and also a concurrent faculty, Special Center for the Study of Northeast India, JNU. One very interesting thing about Professor Oinam, in 2002, he was selected for the post of District Superintendent of Police, DSP Manipur, and topped the state civil and police services examination, which he declined. He specializes in and possesses great interest in numerous areas such as philosophical anthropology, existential phenomenology, social philosophy, Indian philosophy, indigenous religion, conflict and gender studies, and the list is endless. Professor Oinam has delivered numerous lectures, talks, and papers at various fora in India and abroad. We are very honored that he agreed to deliver the inaugural lecture for the Philosophy, Self, and Consciousness course. I welcome you all, and without further ado, I hand it over to Professor Oinam. Thank you. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Sangeeta Menon. I mean, we are meeting after long years. I do still remember first my coming to Thiruvananthapuram, the University of Kerala, where the ICPR Young Scholars Meet was conducted long way back. That was the beginning of my entry to the national scenario in philosophy. Since then, I had been in touch with many, and I'm really grateful to my also my former student, but now Dr. Todaria, who is, I think, teaching in NIAS at the moment as a visiting faculty, perhaps. So when he told me that, I was quite excited for a few reasons. One is you are addressing this issue of experience to a group of scholars not necessarily located within the discipline of philosophy, but across disciplines. And that makes our discussion much more challenging. When we try to look at certain issues or concepts from a specific disciplinary prism, though you come out meticulously, quite rigorously, with the methods of inquiry, with the concepts you are used to in your discipline, our comprehension of the issue or the phenomenon remains extremely limited to your own disciplinary boundary. The fact that when you open this up across disciplines and try to understand this phenomenon called experience per se, that is the real challenge of what Husserl would say, going back to the things themselves, not necessarily bounded by your presuppositions or conceptual tools which you have framed, but more so entering into the discourse or the phenomenon itself as it is. Though, of course, there are lots of issues with such perception, such way of articulation, but then the challenges is of engaging with these issues. There has been, messages often on, but it's not linked to my talk, I believe. I'm audible, right? Clearly?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are.
Okay. So what I will do today is try not to confine myself to the disciplinary background where I have the training, that is phenomenology and existentialism, but also try to venture out, which I am trying to do at the moment. You have mentioned about my association with the Special Center for the Study of Northeast India, where I am also engaging with ethnic studies of the communities, indigenous people, how they experience, look at the issue of experience and perception about the world that they live in. And I find lots of exciting things that we normally do not come across in our traditional boundary or bounds of our discourses, disciplines. So I will be crisscrossing all this and moving. I also have seen the list of speakers and also the themes that you have already met out. So I believe this is the first lecture of this particular program. So let me try to be a little more general so that rather than going closer to a particular issue, I will try to take you back a bit and try to look a canoptic view, take a canoptic view of the entire issues of experience, which has been seen by people across traditions. And when I mean across traditions, I have two sets of classification in mind, a very broad classification. One is what we normally do in philosophy, but perhaps it is also done in other disciplines, is talking about the Western versus the Indian. You try to compare that this is how in the West it has been done and how it is being done in the Indian. So what you call the worldview, civilizational and disciplinary, locatedness, the location. So that is one way in which you try to look at. Another is within what you called discourses of this kind, we commonly make a very sharp distinction between the intellectual and the non-intellectual. And many of us, we tend to look at, very quickly with concepts and problems that are already there within I should not perhaps use the word elite, but I am using it with my lack of other words to use, but an intellectual elites who construct, and within that you try to talk about. And when it doesn't fit in to your discourse, then you call it as a non-intellectual, and we call it by any other name. And this is not a new thing, by the way. This has gone back to the colonial time, and we all know how the discipline of anthropology came up, study of the primitive savages, and how those from the West try to understand this indigenous, what we call today, but primitive at their own discourse, the savages, and try to what you call the civilize them. So the whole intellectual discourse of understanding the non-Western culture has its own baggage, which somehow still carries in one form or the other. So that I am keeping that in mind in front of the audience when I talk of these classifications in mind. One is in terms of traditions we divide. We fall short of talking about the Arabic and the Chinese because we do not know. But in India, for instance, it is quite quick that we make a distinction between the European American on the one side and Indian on the other. And we all also know that this is informed by the colonial experience we have had. So historical, civilizational based classification. And another is intellectual and the non-intellectual. So I will touch upon this form of looking at these perspectives, and then look into the issues of experience in a more generic sense. To begin with, when we talk of experience, first thing that simply, if one has to tell anyone who is not necessarily even a student or master's or even working on consciousness, is that what is experience is that what makes us aware, being aware of. So when we become aware of this aware of, and then I put 3 dots, keeping it open-ended, because aware of what? So being aware of, this very phrase represents the kind of thing we are going to discuss on the issues of experience. So the experience in the most simpler form would be also coming within what you call being aware of the world. Now, this being aware of is certainly being aware of the world around us, whatever we see around, the things around us as we grow, and also in the process being aware of oneself and its relationship with the world. So this awareness is the hallmark of this whole issues of experiencing. But then this awareness also aims at certain forms of objectivity. That I'm aware of the world around me, you are aware of the world around you, so are the others. Now, is this awareness, though the claim itself says, is always a first-person singular account to begin with? Because being aware is always a first-person account. But is it limited to, and this is what Professor Sangeeta Menon has hinted, that is it merely based on the experience of an individual, a subjective, or is there something a much more wider than what one calls as first-person singular experiential account of the world around us? So this awareness necessarily to begin with is a first-person singular. Is there some problem with my connectivity?
No, sir, you're audible.
Is it okay? If you want, I can even put off my, there seems to be some problem with my signal, but in case there are problems, please let us know, because there are lots of messages that come of connectivity. So this first person account, and then try to talk about and a more acceptable way of understanding this world, takes you to the discourse of objectivity in the most simplest form. And in the history, intellectual history, what has turned out is that the awareness about the world is supposed to be brought about by what you call the rational, the reason, as distinct from other forms of means. Because when you say that I'm aware of this, how are you aware of? This question itself takes you to different ways of becoming aware, or different ways of awareness. Awareness as an act. Please do not see it at the moment as a noun, but as an act, as a verb, that awareing of, being aware of, to be aware of. So this awareness as an act, as an activity, is being articulated through different ways. And what we have seen in the history of philosophy, and particularly largely intellectual history, is that rationality or the reason becomes a hallmark of making a very objective claim about this awareness. And we know very well that what we teach our students, and we have also been taught, that Descartes is the father of modern philosophy, and that is Descartes is the one who has, brought the idea of rationality as an indubitable way of bringing certainty of knowledge. Now, this whole claim about rationality is built on certain ways of looking at the tools that you think can bring about objectivity, and to be much more imaginative or romantic. I'm using the word romantic, the claim for universality. Because as much as nationalism is romanticism, I would say even universalism is some form of romanticism. I'm making a strong claim. Now, this overemphasis on what you call rationality has somehow downplayed other forms or means of acting to what you call bringing awareness of this activity. And this has been very beautifully brought out, if you remember, by Friedrich Nietzsche, when he, through his what you call philology, the method of philology, he brings out these two terms carrying two connotations, and that is the Apollonian and Dionysian way of looking at the world. One, it's very interesting that the symbol of the Greek gods representing a concept is very interesting in Nietzschean way of looking at. So Apollo, the god of light, represents what you call as rationality or the reason, because you know that the whole actual way of looking at is when the light is on, what was not sure about is made sure in your own vision. So your vision about things become clearer with the coming in of light. So Apollonian method representing light, reason, and bringing objectivity and rationality. So this is one way in which the history of philosophy has over-prioritized, that is what I say. And what was marginalized, Nietzsche brought out by bringing in the god of wine. And that is the interesting part, that the symbol of wine or passion, which is otherwise almost equated with woman. I mean, if you look at study, the passion, emotion, woman are being put at the one side, and masculinity, reason, clarity, objectivity on the other. And this is also one, I mean, you had been studying this in the gender studies as well, how we distinguish between light reason with masculinity on the one side and passion or emotion, which are not very certain, with woman on the other. And Nietzsche's very interesting question, supposing God was a woman. When he asked this question in his time, suppose that God was a woman, then how will the discourse be? The whole discourse of prioritizing emotion or passion might have surfaced as compared to reason and rationality. So I want to put it from the history to present before you that even in the Western philosophical narrative, the European narrative, even there, the whole emphasis on reason has trivialized other forms of what you call knowledge gaining or acts of becoming aware of. Now, the other ways through which one also looked apart from this reasoning, but linked to the reason, these are not fully watertight compartments, is what you call the perception. And of course, we know that reasoning is also built on perception, but perception itself has always been doubted to some extent. And that is what Descartes began his skeptic stance, built on this skeptic doubt on the very perceptions of sense self-knowledge, and trying to claim that beyond the perception, which cannot give you an objective knowledge, it is the reason and reason alone which will bring you this, the objectivity of this awareness. Now, we have gone into quite a lot in the history of what you call intellectual history in the West. And we came much more later in the 18th, 19th century, the whole idea of consciousness discussion, that consciousness as an act of awareness is much more than what you call as act of perception. The perception by itself is largely limited to our sense experience of the tangible, the experience, the sense experience of the tangible. Dr. Sangeeta is there, maybe you can correct me if there are difference of opinion and we can discuss on this. But the whole issue that phenomenologists brought into the discussion with consciousness is that it is not about sense perception of the tangible. Of course, that is a part of experience, but experience is much more than that. So experience is all about an awareness of an object of any kind whatsoever, even if it is an act of imagination, act of fantasy, even that itself is an act of awareness of a different kind. What we need to see is this experience itself is of not one, but it has a multiple layers or kind or variety. So I would like to emphasize on this, that consciousness as an act of experience has been very, very significantly being discussed. And what comes out very interesting about this debate is that when you experience, or when you talk, say, I'm aware of experience or being conscious of, you are always conscious of something other than this act. There is the act directs itself towards an object of knowledge. And this is being understood across in the phenomenological tradition. But the debate or the disagreement emerges in the very fact that where do you locate this act of experiencing, or act of awareness, or act of consciousness. I am interchangeably using them. They are not identical, but I'm interchangeably using this. Now, this being aware of, being conscious of, which also suggests that I'm experiencing. By being aware is also implying that I'm experiencing. This act, can it be a standalone act? That becomes a question, because our human mind is very susceptible to classification of or distinction of one kind or the other. And if you remember, many of us do not read. Unfortunate part of our Indian intellectual circle is that we read about anybody else from outside, but of our own scholars. There was one who is no more. I happened to stay with him for 10 months of his last days in this world, Professor Surendra Barlinge. And Belief, Reasons and Reflection is a book that has come out from Indian Philosophical Quarterly from Pune University. If you can lay your hands on. Many of you might have read. And very interesting part that he makes is all that is distinguishable need not necessarily be separable. So he was a Kantian in one way. So distinguishability need not imply separability. So I'm borrowing from Barlinge and trying to engage with this, that when you are aware of the world or of the self, of an object of knowledge, so it is very obvious that human mind would like to link this act to a doer. Every act, because of our own experience, we have seen that an action is always done by a subject. So there is a doer and there is something which is doing or being done. So this is a human mind who would like to distinguish that this doing is someone, and act is a different way. I mean, action is separate. Now, this distinguishability of the doer and the doing makes many to think that this doer can be separated from the doing. And this debate, if you remember, Sartre and Husserl, the Sartre's critique of Husserlian ego, and trying to say that, do not give emphasis on the ego, but onto the act and the object, right? And ego only for a conventional medium is something very interesting to look at. So because that this ego or the I is always located somewhere, it has not only a locational point, and this point also is in temporal sequences. So in order to arrive at so-called the objectivity of the knowledge, or objectivity of this act of knowing, or act of awareness, or experience, you call it, you try to somehow accept the inseparability, yet try to separate it. Husserlian whole idea of this transcendence or eidetic reduction was, at one level, it criticizes the natural, what you call positivist science of not giving significance to the subject on the one hand, and saying that subject is inseparable from the act, yet tries to bring the subject out of the location, out of the variable location, because the moment you say the subject is always located at certain point in space and time. So in order to bring that out, you talk of transcendental ego, and the whole debate goes on. So I will not go further into that, and this we all know. What is interesting here, let me take you to another shift now, which I told you in the beginning, which I'm going to move to and fro, is another form of classification in the Indian tradition, Indian intellectual traditions, is that apart from all our limitations and all our criticisms even, one thing beautiful about Indian intellectual traditions is that it is not one voice, but it is a multiple voice. And this debate between different voices, different intellectual paradigms, perspective itself throws open the possibility of a rich discourse within these own traditions. Whether it has stopped, is it continuing, that is a debate or discussion which I am not into, and perhaps I am not capable of. But what I found interesting is that even within what you call perception as a form of experience, a limited kind, which we think that perception is all about the tangible sense perception, you have in the Nyaya tradition also, I am not a Nyayayikas, but I found this very interesting, the whole idea of alaukik pratyaksha, that ordinary and extraordinary, that there are perception which is not of the sense perception of the kind we talk about. Whether you call it sixth sense, and again, that is a borrowing from the Western categories. Even if I do that, it's a bad doing, because of my own training, I'm also, culprit into this, that we are so accustomed to the kind of narrative that we immediately try, like I did just now, that saying it is alaukik pratyaksha about the sixth sense. This itself is an imposition I am making on the Nyaya tradition. The tradition itself accepts that this pratyaksha is not necessarily of the sense, common sense experience, but there are extraordinary sense experience in this tradition itself. Then another concept I would like to bring within the Indian tradition itself, and this takes me from Nyaya, is a very clear-cut, institutionalized intellectual school or discipline, to something which is slightly different, which you might call non-intellectual. And I'm not shy of using that, because this is not only popular today, not because of that, I had been always looking at this, is that look at Mahabharata, for instance. The whole discussion on the reality, the truth, the ethics, which Krishna keeps on, bombarding Arjuna with all his intellectual exercise of reason and rationality. And I had been reading this from Pune itself by Professor V.N. Jha and Mrs. Jha, reading Sanskrit to Gita. And I find this very interesting, that when Arjuna is saying, no, I cannot kill my brothers and relatives, what is the point? That whole debate, then Krishna keeps going, explaining that, you had been stupid, you have to look, and then there is something called more truth, then you have to talk of niskama karma, and karma is not built on, so on and so forth. Mind you, in the whole discourse of Gita, and this is, of course, from my limited reading of Gita, and I'm open to corrections, and I still stand to what I'm saying, is that all the rational arguments, the reasons that Krishna is using has failed. None of the reasons that Krishna gives to Arjuna could convince Arjuna. So in spite of all your rationality, which is built, of course, by Krishna is wanting him to fight, so he gives all kinds of reasons, but Arjuna also has the counter arguments of not to fight. So what you see, what Hume was saying, that reason is a slave of passion, is coming up in an exemplar in Mahabharata. And finally, what Krishna does, and this is an interesting thing, whether you believe or not believe, it doesn't really matter, but the narrative is interesting. Your believing in Krishna or your believing in Gita is of less importance than the whole narrative, which is very interesting. When everything fails, and what does Krishna do? Krishna comes up with his Virat Swarup, the Virat Swarup, right? My Hindi perhaps is as bad as perhaps Sangeeta's Hindi. So we are in the same equal, perhaps. So the Virat Swarup, the ultimate, what you call vision, that he shows that who I am the Brahman, I am the ultimate. And when only you have what you call alaukik pratyaksha, you might call it, or you call it anubhav, or the experience. This is another word. The anubhav is also being talked very often. Ki, main apne anubhav se bol raha hu. I'm talking from my own experience. And this is a sakshat experience, direct experience with the ultimate. And then only Krishna is convinced. Now, what is interesting about this whole narrative is that all your reason is coming from somewhere, serving certain purposes. And here is something you are directly in encounter with. What you call the Krishna's Virat Swarup. You are the ultimate. So I bow down to you. So you are the Paramatma and I am the Jivatma. Now this goes into a different discourse. I'm coming back to here, but let me move a little bit, to make a comparison with this, with the Husserlian articulation of what you call capturing the eidos, or the meaning or the essence of the things, objects of the world. And this has been very interestingly given by us, by this David Servan in a very small textbook on or consciousness, on phenomenology. And this, he gives the example of which Husserl has given on Beethoven. Now, I keep giving this in my classroom, not through the Beethoven, but a music I'm very fond of, Rag Bhageshri by, she is no more, I'm told, Veena Sahasrabuddhe. She was in Mumbai, IIT, I believe. I never had an opportunity to meet her. Now you listen to music. I'm giving this example of classical music. You can go for Hindi films also, in a very beautiful, maybe a Malayali film music as well. But look at this one particular music, which I can give you, is that when you are listening to beautiful music, what are you doing? As an individual, Bhagat, as someone sitting here, or Gautama who is listening to. Now you are listening to a music, and very empirically you can explain this in terms of sound bite SB1 in time T1. Let us say we begin straight away now, the music begins. So time T1, SB1, sound bite 2 and time T2, sound bite 3 and time T3, go on endlessly, n number. So every moment you are listening to a sound bite at a certain temporal sequence, what you are capturing is a particular sound. You are experiencing a sound in the empirical domain, right? And this music goes on. And if you try this music, if you haven't listened, but many of you already knows better than me, but if you listen to this music really in the late night, the Bhagyasri, I mean, this classical Indian musicians classifying music in the form of temporality is a superb idea. I mean, this has its own rationality. And you find that at certain point after listening to this music, we say, wow. I say, wow. You get a joy out of this music. Now that joy, that experience, which is a very peculiar form of experience, it is not the experience of perception of sound bite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Neither is it an aggregation of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But there is a transcendence, and which Husserl called adumbration. I'm not going further into that. That's not my job at the moment. But the aggregation or the unit is not, it is not aggregation, but a unity out of the sound which is at a level of transcendence. Now, how do you call about this? So this, I say, has a lot of parallel one can do with what I gave you the example of, reasons failing, and there is a certain form of experience which is not an ordinary experience, but it's kind of a transcendence. Now let me come back to the Indian tradition again and continue with the Gita. Not necessarily now with the Gita, but we all know that the word darshana, though it has been used, I mean, much before as well, and we continue to still use it, philosophy as darshan, which literally means seeing through, right? And this saying through, philosophy is not merely about reasoning, but certain form of understanding. It is not about reasoning or knowledge, but something more than that. So this word I use, this understanding, could be better explained, could be achieved with the whole motive of how the idea of darsana has been conceptualized. So darshan, which implies looking through, is not merely about gaining knowledge. It is a much more than that. And this has been highlighted much more by none other than Swami Vivekananda. And if you remember that how Vivekananda brought in the intuition as a form of knowledge gaining, a medium of knowledge. Intuition as a form of experience, right? And which I would say is the experience through our consciousness, a chit, you call it, and that is taking into a higher form of Satchit and Anand, which I will not go into at the moment. But this whole idea of intuition as a form of experience has been recognized by Swami Vivekananda when he brings the idea of Advaita in his own philosophy, practical Vedanta, which is often called of him. And there is a debate which was initiated. And if you go to the history of this 20th century philosophy debate in this country, it was started by none other than Wilhelm Habermas, a German Indologist, a Sanskritist, who said that the best way of understanding what philosophy is should be in Indian vernaculars, or what you call Indian language. If you have to bring a word that will come closer to philosophy as understood in the West, is Anviksiki and not Darsana. And this whole Daya Krishna and other all followed. And this word also Habermas found, and Ramakrishna Bhattacharya also has worked on this. And it has been found that it is as old as Kautilya's Arthashastra. And it also is not only used in Sankhya, it is also used in, what is that? Lokayat. And even in the animal husbandry, in agriculture. These are all being, this word, this Anviksiki is being used. And Anviksiki is often said as a rational articulation, a practical reasoning. And that debate goes on. Why I brought in this debate is that Indian tradition has its own way of looking at philosophy as an experience, experientially gained possibility. So if philosophy or any form of intellectual discourse is not necessarily through reason and reason alone, but there are multiple approaches or ways of what you call awareness, and intuition and spirituality are also one way of looking at philosophizing. But many of us, because of our scientific hold which we have, and which is fair enough. I'm not, I'm speaking in NIAS, which is located in IISc Bangalore, right? So I don't know whether I'm out of fashion to even talk of spirituality and intuition as a form of experience of the consciousness. And that is one dimension I would like to add on, because this, what you call intuition or experience, and this is taking me to the last part of my lecture. I don't know how many minutes I have. I have some more time, right?
Yes, sir, you have time, sir.
I have time, so good. So this, what you call intuition, which is normally seen as non-intellectual, right? This intuition, which is seen as not rational enough, not justifiable, itself, mind you, in the West itself has been used by René Descartes, whom we called as father of modern philosophy, who was a mathematician. And we know that in mathematics, intuition plays a significant role. Now, let me say let me raise this question for the audience here. What made Descartes think that when I say cogito ergo sum, I think, now I think, therefore I am, right? But he began with his skeptic stance on doubting this I itself, right? He was doubting everything around the objects of your perception. You are doubting object, your articulation, imagination, you are doubting. Even you are doubting on your own act. Am I what really I? That even, am I not a devilish influence? Even that he was doubting. But, and one thing that he arrived at is that act of doubting cannot be doubted, right? So the certainty was not on anything else, but on the act of doubting. Now my question is, which many have raised this question much more before me, is that why do you have to, in case you have doubted everything, why you have to now forcibly bring the doubter into this act of doubting? You have begun with the doubter. You have begun with the subject, the first person of his certainty of knowledge. Everything you have doubted. Only thing that was certain was this act of doubting, act of thinking. But what made Descartes think? The thinking must have a thinker. So is it not some form of intuition out of our experience? That we have always seen that an action is preceded by a doer. If that is the case, that if Big Bang happens, is there some other being which made the Big Bang happen? Science says that, an event need not necessarily be linked with the doer of an event. Event can just happen. So it cannot doubt be also an event that can just happen. I'm just raising this, counterpoint that then another point I will put with this, I will make a full stop on discussion on Descartes, is that why Descartes have to think that God is the ultimate substance beyond mind and body? Was it not an intuition? We don't discuss about this, but we say Descartes was the most rational, first rationalist and a modern father of the modern philosophy, which is built on reason and reason alone. But meditation itself is a word. What is meditation? Is not meditation an intuitive exercise? So we have been following things without really engaging with the master itself. We have listened to the master's servants telling us to what the servant says, master's disciple says, we become disciples of the disciple of masters. Now, this whole idea of intuition has been recognized, at least in Indian tradition. You may like it, may not like it. And this is what I say, India's multiple voices, that even for an intellectual discourse, this experience of not the intellectual variety of intuition or even spirituality has been a part. Now, you may ask me, you said, is it not too subjective? Is not intuition too subjective? Is it not a first-person account that cannot be translated through the medium of language to others? So it remains confined to the world of the believer or experiencer. So that is one quote-unquote lacuna, which we put it on to this medium, what you call intuition. I have two answers to this. One is Wittgensteinian ways of looking at, we read Wittgenstein, his tractatus, his philosophical investigations, and we also read him, many reads him through the eyes of his own teacher, Bertrand Russell, which Wittgenstein thought that his teacher never understood him. Later on, only very recently, a few years back, it was Hilary Putnam, who is no more there, but he wrote about 6 Jewish philosophers. And Putnam himself being a Jewish, Wittgenstein is included in this sixth Jewish philosopher. And the point here I want to make is that Wittgenstein recognized the significance or place of mysticism and intuition. If you read his lectures on aesthetic beliefs and religious practices, you will find there that a lot has been discussed about things beyond mere positivist articulation of our awareness about. And music has been used very significantly by Wittgenstein to understand these dynamics of intuition. Much about music and art goes with this whole discourse of intuition and mysticism. Secondly, I would like you to take to many of the indigenous traditions which I am studying at the moment in the northeastern part, and this is not necessarily located with the northeast. If you look at even the classical Indian traditions, there are lots of mystical elements onto that. And this mysticism, what I see, religion and mysticism, is not about a first-person experience alone. True, like any other science or any other poetry or any other forms of discourses of knowledge, we use to begin with from the first-person account. And this first persons gets translated into objectivity through mediums which are either verifiable through cross-checking, or medium what you call as language as commonly used tool. Because if you know that it is in literature and in many traditions, it is the language which plays a linking role about what you experience with others. And what has been interestingly found, that when a community talks about certain experience, though experience is always a first-person account, but that experience is a shared experience. This shared experience becomes extremely important. And this is not peculiar to the indigenous people alone. This shared experience and the lived experience are being taught much earlier in the intellectual history itself. In phenomenological tradition, you look at Dilthey, if you look at Alfred Schuss and many other, the whole idea of shared experience, lived experience, even Lebenswelt as a life word are being used. What is Lebenswelt, a life word? Can there be a Lebenswelt of me with someone without having a common shareable means of engaging? Either it may be through language, or it may be through your scientific reasoning, or even it is about emotions that are being brought up. You are brought up in a particular community, you live with that emotions, you believe in that emotion. So this whole issue of shared experience or emotions that are translated through this sharing of experiences through languages, not necessarily of the kind we call structured language. And we know, again, I'm coming back, I don't want, I could go more in details about indigenous worldview, then you will say, oh, he is talking all this story. But let me come back again. What was Wittgenstein doing when he makes a distinction between small L and big L? Language which a community speaks, and language which is much more broader, a sign language, for instance. Even the sign language could be very, what you call, mistaken. What the Bengalis and even the South Indians also do, like, yes is like this, ha ha, cholbe, cholbe. Now, if you put your heads right, is it dry, yes or no? You need to know the meaning of the way in which you move your head. Unless you live in that community, you will not understand whether the person is saying yes or the person is saying no. So even the language, though in a more structured way could be of the community speaking, but there are languages of different kinds. And my submission is that when we talk of experience, there are experience not necessarily of the sense perception, but of different kinds, intuition being one. And I am using the intuition cutting across tradition to tell you that don't get bogged down by the word intuition and say that, oh, this is not scientific. I say Descartes was using intuition. I'm saying Vivekananda was using intuition. I'm saying Husserl was using intuition. Of course, it may not be same. Now, are you going to say, now I'm going to open up a question and making a statement in the form of a question. When Mirabai was experiencing Krishna, one way is saying that is hallucination. Another is an experiencing of a transcendental love, which is built on a larger spiritual narrative of this country, of the entire universe, where the self is located, the world, the universe, the self. Now, when such a philosophical narrative is in the backdrop of your mind, this experiencing of the Krishna should not be doubted so much. It doesn't really matter whether Krishna comes as a person or an image, but the point is experiencing the love, experiencing certain connect with what you call forces of nature, which I think in the Saiva tradition, unfortunately, this is again I want to make, I have more of complaint than statement now, is that look at Indian philosophy departments. How many departments have courses on Saivism? Have they even, you have Kashmiri Saivism, which is equally rich as NIAS tradition. You have Veera Saivism in Karnataka. All of these are not being taught except for some pockets in the country where the teachers happen to be interested in. Otherwise, this never finds a place because we don't want to recognize this. Now, these are few points that I want to make, that the idea of experience should be looked at when intellectually with an open mind and receptivity, and not be bogged down right from the beginning with prejudices and presuppositions. And I'm doing this truly as a phenomenologist in the Husserlian sense, that look at the things as they are, how the people experience. If Akka Mahadevi talks of experience of certain kind, Lal there talks of certain experience of a particular kind, Mirabai talks of experience of a certain kind, Kabir talks of, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about, which I'm doing at the moment. I'm bringing this because I'm looking at religion and mysticism at the moment. And this whole issue of experience, consciousness, is that, are you going to just throw them away by saying that there is no justifiability? Then I am also asking you the same question. Was not Descartes also going by intuition when he linked act or event with a doer or actor? When it is convenient to us, we accept it without much problem. When it is not about the ordinary form of experience, which the Nyayikas call as alaukik pratyaksha, then we say this is to be discarded. But as a student of philosophy, at least I can talk to those who are students of philosophy, that we should be open to the intellectual ways of, or even so-called non-intellectual ways, but which connects, experiences which connects. Was Mirabai such an idiot, such a fool, or was she a mad woman that every people in the community started following us and we still talk of Mira Bhajan? Was she not saying something meaningful? Is she not communicable to us? What Mirabai Akka Mahadevi or Lal Ded, all these talks, experienced and shared, cannot they be understood? If they can be understood, then we have to recognize the fact that being aware of the world, this act of awareness is not one kind, but of multiple kind. Only thing is we are accustomed to the idioms and vocabularies and rules and regulation, the grammar of a few particular kind of act of awareness. And we are not aware of the grammar of the other kind. And so it is like what I call a fight between the nationalists and Marxists in JNU. So I am located in JNU, so I can say that when you are blind to the others, when you are only true to yours, you think that what I see is correct, what the other says is wrong, then only you start saying that, well, others is wrong, others is nonsense. But this, even if the other is nonsense, that nonsense can be very meaningful. And if you can bring out the meaningfulness out of the nonsense, even then we can communicate. And that is what I call sharing of experiences. Thank you. I think I will wind up here. We'll take more questions. I hope it is okay with you.
Absolutely, sir. I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say that you had us spellbound for over an hour. I once again thank you so much for taking this time. And I think you've left all of us with a lot to think about, and we experienced a lot through the talk. So thank you so much, sir. And there are many comments and many questions that have been posed. I would just like to say a couple of things before I open the session for questions. One is that the WhatsApp group will be open for questions after the talk. So any questions which are not addressed here, you can please post there. Two, I request all the participants to please keep their questions brief so that more people will have the room and the space to speak. And three, any questions which are not already in the chat box, I request people to please use the reactions button, which is at the bottom of the screen, and raise your hand so that we'll be able to call you out. And we would prefer it if you can ask your questions yourself. We will call you and request you to please ask your questions, and we will unmute you as well. So please be prepared and please be there. Thank you. So there was also a small assignment, which I will say at the end of the question answer session. The first question is from Mr. Narasimhamurthy. Could you please unmute yourself, sir? Could you please ask your question?
Thank you, Professor. Like I have very basic questions. Like if somebody will ask, what is self? How do I define self? And my second question will be like, can we use self and consciousness interchangeably? Like, is there same? Like self without consciousness, is this possible? Or like the consciousness needs an object like self? So, you know, my question, I think it's very basic. Still, you know, I thought, you know, like I should ask. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy. I would be beginning with the most simple way of looking at this, that for me, the idea of self is always number one to begin with as an embodied self. I, who is a bodily located, because this first person, I was making this singular first person individual, that is for me the first point of departure of a self. Come whatever you call it, as spirituality, transcendence, all those comes much later. The very fact that I am an embodied being itself is the fulcrum on which the whole idea of self is built. Even I would say to this extent that what we often say, oh, what is that in Sankara? Jagat Mithya Brahma Satyam, right? So even to say that Brahma is Satyam, you have to negate the Vyavahar. So Vyavahar comes first. So, you know, that the empirical, the embodiment through which you are speaking, that have to be first recognized. Then you may deny, you may demolish, you may accept, that's a different point. But point of departure is this embodiment. That cannot be denied. This is my submission to the self. Then, of course, the self, which I was giving the example of listening to Bina Sahasar Budhe's, Raga Bhagesri. I think when I was lost and almost goes into a trance, listening to her, or Gangubai Hangal's, Yaman Rag, you listen to and you get lost. I don't think I was aware. Then I am a Bhagat who is from Manipur. I am teaching in JNU. I am not bothered. I lost myself with Gangubai Hangal. I lost myself with, so this ability to get lost is also a part of the self. So this self is always volatile. It can transcend, like Ramakrishna going up and talks with, extremely, we say, Kali, Ami tu dekhechi, he says to Noren, unlike many Dwarkanath Tagore who says you have an eye of a yogi, but it is Ramakrishna Paramhamsa who says, yes, I have seen Kali, every day I feed her. Now, this is madness in our eyes, but that self transcends. But nonetheless, this self is located somewhere, but it is a very fragile, very volatile nature. And my conception of self, if I have to address to other students of, philosophy of consciousness or personhood, is I believe in the maximalist notion of self, rather than the Straussians and others talking of minimalist, where you only enter into a metaphysics where you cannot talk of. But for me, I am blood and flesh. And this is the point of departure for a self. Without this, I am not there. I cannot. And about the consciousness, if you are asking me, my answer would be linked into this, that this self cannot be without the consciousness. But if you look at the history of ideas in philosophy, I told you Jean-Paul Sartre's difference with Husserl on the whole idea of ego, that there are different debates that exist, and that is the beauty of philosophy, that there is no final answer. And that is all that I can tell you.
Professor, if you don't mind, I have one more question. We are talking about the Bhagavad Gita, the discussion between. Is it
I'm
okay
sorry
if I
to
ask?
interrupt you, sir. There are a lot more questions. Could I take this in the end after we have covered the remaining? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Since we have a lot of questions, what I would invite everyone to do is to please first ask the questions, and then Professor Oinam can take whichever he likes, because there are a lot, and I think it would be helpful if we could all also hear the questions, since that is also the spirit of this platform. I also request everyone to please introduce yourself briefly and ask the question briefly as well. It would also be very nice if we could see you, and at least now when we are interacting, and this is an interactive part of today's session. So kindly switch on your videos, introduce yourselves, and ask the question briefly. We'll just go through the questions first. Next is Ms. Kanchan Gogde. Please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Hello, yeah, this is Kanchan, myself Kanchan from Pune. I'm working with the Times of India and also pursuing right now PhD on the speeches of Swami Vivekananda and Jiddu Krishnamurti. So my question was regarding one of the statements of Jiddu Krishnamurti, where he always said that observer is the observed, or experience is the experiencer, or even in Shaddarshanas, we have that imagery of two birds, lower role self and higher self. So how do you explain this from the phenomenological point of view? Do we have two selves?
Yeah. Okay. Can I, you're true, I believe. So I can only tell you this much, that even this, where does this come from? The whole that the observer and the observed are one and the same is coming from a particular belief, a worldview, which says of the monism of the ultimate kind, right? Unconditioned monism, which is what Vivekananda would also say. So that informs you about that everything, the world is the same, I would put you like this. In philosophy, there is no final answer. There is always a contesting views. Unless there is contestation, there is no philosophy. If there is a final answer which all of you and I agree, then we have done away with philosophy. We may be doing science, but philosophy necessarily means the whole discipline of philosophy means it engages with essentially contested concepts. Essentially contested. If it is not essentially contested, it is not philosophy. And this debate on I am thou and I and thou. So I can only take you from Jiddu Krishnamurti to Ramachandra Gandhi and Martin Buber. And Martin Buber writes an article, a book called I and Thou. The I and you. You is the thou is the God and I, the subject. And in the Jewish tradition, I cannot be God. God has created me. I am in love with God. God is in love with me, but I am not God. Whereas in the Advaita tradition, it transcends and I am God. And Ramachandra Gandhi was answered to Martin Buber is I am thou. This is also another book. So it's an interesting debate. And phenomenology, of course, believes in the embodiment so much that your physical, mundane embodiment is from where you begin with. You transcend, but you always come back to the body that you are in. Anybody else? I have very little answer because I know so little. So rest is for you.
Yeah, thank you all. And I think we all understand that this is a very participatory and engaging with each other. So we were just discussing behind the curtain also. We would like to hear more people asking. So we would like to hear more voices. And given the limited time, so Professor Bhagat can take up one or two questions to respond at the very end. And because we are not going to leave it here, we are going to curate the questions. We are going to curate the responses. We are going to take every question very seriously. But during this discussion, we would like to hear other voices. So I would call out as I see the hands over there, because that's one easy way, as Dr. Pushia said, to identify. And please introduce yourself very briefly in one or two lines, and also briefly articulate your question. So I see in my screen Dushyant Soni, which is with his arms up.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. My name is Dushyant Soni, and I'm looking for a topic to do my PhD upon. I'm interested in philosophy, and I'm from a yoga background. So, yeah. And from this, my basic question is just again that everybody's asking, what is consciousness? So I'm again stuck with the same thing, and I want to ask you again, what is consciousness?
Yes, to stay with your question, we will have responses for that. Thank you, Dushyant Soni. May I ask Biplav Karak to be briefly introducing yourself and then brief with your question as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Right. So, yeah, my name is Biplav Karak, and I'm doing my PhD from IIT Jodhpur, and I'm interested in consciousness and trying and the kind of controversies that is revolving around this particular thing. So I was just thinking about, so towards the end of the lecture, Professor Oinam talked about including so many different aspects into consideration, because in consciousness studies even the conceptual mainstays are not sorted out, right? So I was just thinking of the concept of Hornswoggle problem as introduced by Professor Patricia Churchland, where she says that it's not, I mean, it was a specific response that she delivered against uh, the division of soft problem and hard problem uh, introduced by Professor Chalmers. So where in this Hornswoggle problem, basically what she says is that uh, you know uh, there are, I mean,
Mr.
we
Biplav, you would agree with me that we have to give chance for many people, isn't it? It's
right,
a
right,
good
ma'am. Yeah,
idea
I'm
to be
trying to.
brief. And so you can write in detail either through message or you can email us. So let's hear many voices. Isn't that the spirit?
Yes, ma'am. Right.
Thank
Yeah, I'm
you.
trying to just conclude.
Yes, so let's go to other person so you can message us. Mr.
Okay.
Varun Bigmal, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. You may please introduce yourself and ask your question very briefly, within less
Yeah,
than a minute, please.
yeah. I'm Varun Bigmal, and I'm a doctoral scholar at the Center for Political Studies, JNU, Delhi. So my question is very basic. I mean, it's about this notion of pan-experientialism or panpsychism, as it is quite popular these days in the analytic tradition. And we see some examples of that tradition in the Pratyabichna philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism, as argued by Chakravarti Ram Prasad. So how do you see notions of pan-experientialism, which in some sense is also non-anthropocentric in comparison to the notion that you formulated, which is of embodied self in the phenomenological tradition? So that's it.
Yeah, I think Nagasri Santosh decided to lower hand, so I go to Manish Sharma, please.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Manish Sharma. I'm doing PhD from Punjab University, Chandigarh. My topic is on the self and autonomy. So I have a question regarding the phenomenological experience. Can we differentiate between transcendental, and transcendent? If we can make a differentiation, if you may like to differentiate on that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May I request Meera Menon to read out maybe perhaps one or two from the chat box, the questions or comments, so that we can hear them?
So we have one comment, one question from Shabat Sani, who asks, I was wondering, can we say the beyond intellectual awareness instead of non-intellectual awareness when we talk of Mirabai or Bhakti tradition in general? And we have a question from Sri Srividya. Sorry, it's a comment. He says, as an artist, I've been inquiring into intuition as an integral act or aspect of consciousness in practice. And this has been a very rewarding lecture for me because many of the questions and journeys I made through the last 6 years for my doctorate, Professor Bhagat brought together brilliantly in an hour's lecture. So yeah, and she's also requesting a reading list.
May I ask Niharika Sharma to see if there are any messages or questions we should read out?
Yes, there is one question by Surbi, which says, can other affect my experience? And there are many comments, I think, which says, please refer to Advait Vedant School and try rereading the Gita, which someone called Gita has responded by giving them a version of what to be read. So thank you.
Right, so we don't see, okay, we see one more hand, Jay Patel.
I just wanted to ask, like, Professor.
Please introduce yourself first briefly.
Yeah, sorry. I study philosophy at bachelor's level in MSU Baroda. And I want to ask Professor Oinam that like he pointed to truth woman, like he pointed to women, like how Nietzsche puts women as someone who's more of a desirous, but he also questioned truth as woman. How do you see this truth and woman getting linked?
So now I think I hand over the baton to Dr. Pushya Gautama to conduct the rest of the session and perhaps asking Professor Oinam to, if he wishes to respond to any.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Thank you.
There are two more questions. Thank you, ma'am. From Nagasri Santosh, would you like to ask your question, Nagasri?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute you. If you can, please.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vanan. Actually, I had one question, that is the Atman, what we hear in our Indian philosophy, is it same as the self, what we come across in the Western philosophy? Because if there is any difference, in what way they differ? Like, I just wanted a clarity in that.
And we also request a brief introduction of your own Atman.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm Nagashri. I'm MA in clinical psychology and also MSc in biotechnology, but I'm very much inclined to the study of philosophy and consciousness, self and consciousness study. So I've been a part of this quite some time. So In that way, I have joined the talk. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. The next question, I think, is from Maya Dodd. Would you like to ask your question, Maya? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to be in this course. Professor Oinam, I think your point was very well taken about the different ways in which experience is warranted and can be thought of as meaningful, right, in terms of categories. But since we live in a time where, you know, virtual reality and such is literally has arrived, and the idea of false consciousness has also been part of the sort of understanding of what advertising and other sort of industries are doing, is there a space for authenticity when we're talking about false consciousness also then? Does that assume that there is a true consciousness separate from false?
Thank you, Ms. Maya Dodd, for your question. We, of course, heard you, though we are unable to see you, but at least can we know who you are? A brief introduction, please.
Absolutely. I am a professor also. I teach at Flame University in Pune, and I come from the humanities sort of field, but my training is in literature.
Thank you, Maya. We have, I think someone else has raised their hands. I think Ms. Vishakha Sen has raised her hand. You have a question? Please introduce yourself and then ask it.
Good evening, all of you. I thank our speaker and Menon ma'am for introducing this course to us, all from different diverse backgrounds. My question is from sir that I am pursuing doctoral research in the idea of self in Sudhir Kakkar's psychoanalytic theory and literary hermeneutics. So, does the sense of self as experience is affected by ideologies, and how?
Thanks, Ms. Vishakha. Yeah, I think another question from Mr. Biplak Karak. Would you please like to ask the question?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead, Doctor, because there's
Sure,
limited
sure.
time now,
Sure.
because then Professor Oinam can respond to that.
So thank you all for asking so many questions and making this session so interactive and lively. I now request Professor Oinam to answer any one or two questions that he found interesting and that will be applicable to many of the people who asked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to all the questions. Perhaps even I missed out the first, the question that was asked. He also wanted another question, but anyway, that was missed out. Quite a lot of questions, and I don't think I can engage with all of them. All were very important questions. See, I would put one point. This is not in terms of answering to each and every question, but a few points that I want to make, and that may gets linked to your question. If it doesn't get linked, that it is my limitations. So you can forgive me for that. My brother, who is a journalist, tells me once that there is no good news or bad news. All news are good. In fact, even if it is a blaming of an individual, it is popularity that comes. That's a very pragmatic way of looking at journalism. But I would take a similar stance here. Philosophies, we should not see as a right and a wrong, truth and false. Truth and falsity is a subject matter dealt with by science, logic, and similar disciplines. And also those part of philosophy which are scientifically inclined, because you know philosophy is always philosophy of some disciplines. It is always linked to it. So those aspects of philosophy linked to science will talk of truth and falsity. And there is no one narrative agreed. I believe that the significance of philosophy lies in the meaningful narrative of what has been philosophized. We play with ideas, with concepts. Without concepts, philosophy stands nowhere. Even that experience that we have must get translated in some form of language and concept. And what is important for philosophy is to bring out the meaningfulness. If I can communicate to you that the task of philosophy is completed, at least a particular task of philosophy. If I say that my philosophy is right and yours is wrong, based on certain yardstick, mind you, that yardstick comes from somewhere and with certain purpose. So philosophy should not be reduced to truth and falsity. That is one. Secondly, philosophy talks of consciousness at various levels. Many philosophies talk at various levels differently, and it has meaningfulness. In some traditions, consciousness is only an operational notion. Even it cannot be defined. A consciousness can be understood meaningfully only when it is linked to the object of consciousness. Some phenomenologists believe in that. But there are others who thinks that consciousness, which is otherwise supposed to be an act of awareness, itself has been given a ontological foundation, an ontological meaning, that consciousness become a substance, right? So it is on who is speaking, which philosophy you are doing. So there is no one philosophy. That is my concluding remark, that there is no one philosophy, but there are philosophies in plural. And these philosophies are built on life world, lived experiences of people. Without people, there is no philosophy. It is only people who makes philosophy. And these people are always product of a community, a group. And I'm not saying of, community in the cultural sense, but a community as a group even can come out with. So that is all that I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bhagat, for taking this time. Before I hand it over to Meera Menon for the formal vote of thanks, I'd just like to, on behalf of NIAS CSP and everyone who's here, personally offer my gratitude for the time and the intensely reflective and experiential lecture. Just a couple of announcements before I hand it over. One is that there will be an assignment for all the forthcoming courses, which will also contribute to the grades and the certificate which is being offered. It consists of a 500 to 1,000 word essay of what each individual has understood from the content of the resource person's lecture. This can be sent to the NIAS official ID, NIAS Consciousness Studies Program at nias.res.in, which will be shared with you in the chat box. And we expect that this will be sent to us 1 week, before the next lecture, so that it can be evaluated and graded. So grading and certificate offering will be based on attendance as well as how each individual performs in this essay. Secondly, a Google Doc of questions has been curated, questions and comments, which will be shared with Professor Bhagat, and he can answer this at his leisure. And once it has been answered, the Google Doc will be shared with all the participants. Briefly after this, the WhatsApp group will also be opened if there are any remaining questions, which will also be taken into the Google Doc, or if there's any discussion that the participants feel like having, the Google Doc is meant for that. So Professor Bhagat has also been kind enough to say that any participants who wish to personally write to him and ask questions can also do that. So his mail ID will also be shared in the chat box. So yeah, that's it from my end. Thank you all, and hand it over now to Meera for the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pushya. And first of all, let me give my sincere gratitude to Dr. Bhagat Oinam for being with us today. On behalf of Team CSP, we thank you, sir. And also Dr. Sankita Menon for making this platform available for all of us here today. It is the discussions by Dr. Sankita ma'am that has given birth to all these courses. So thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Dr. Pushya, for this flawless coordination of the course, and Niharika for enabling Zoom, and also our team members, Abhishek and Ashwini, who work relentlessly for all our courses. So thank you all of you for joining us today. And the next class is going to be by Dr. Saurabh Tadaria from the National Institute of Advanced Studies. He will be talking again on the theme self and experience in philosophy under the topic of embodiment on February 15th. So we look forward to having all of you there as well. So thank you everybody once again on behalf of Team CSP. We are very happy to have you all here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.